Welcome to Be a Light with Muxiang podcast. I'm your host, Muxiang Payeski. Over the years, through many platforms, organizations, even across the globe, I have met many inspirational individuals. Recently, I had the privilege to have met an amazing woman, a mother who has raised two beautiful, confident children who were adopted from China. And the journey was so inspiring. So now, today, I have invited her to my podcast to share her story and a lot of the interesting things behind it, also inspiring details behind it. So welcome, Anna Gray. Anna?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm glad
Thank
to
you so
chat to you.
much. Yeah, I appreciated that you reached out to me through Rob Lawless, who is
Mhm.
the human connection expert.
Right. And
And
here we
with
are.
this, yeah, here we are. And I love this human connection. I believe you also value it very much.
Very much. Yes, I'm
And
a
the
big fan.
initial,
Mhm.
yeah, the initial reason you reached out to me is to learn about my background, who grew up during the one-child policy and
Mhm.
wanted to find out whether what you heard aligned with what I experienced.
Right.
And that was a great conversation.
I'm a fan of everything happens for a reason. And when I met Rob and we talked a little bit, and he mentioned you and that he remembered your story, I thought, well, I've never really talked to anyone that lived during that time. And I know that my children are a product of that. So I thought, well, there had to be a reason why I had this conversation and that your name was brought up. And I just felt this pull to reach out just to hear. And I didn't have any expectation. I just felt this pull that I needed to hear your story so that I could put up maybe a picture together in my mind as to what people had experienced during that time so that maybe I could have a better insight to share with my children. And that's really why I reached out to you. Well, number one is because I love meeting new people, but number two is because I felt like there was a reason why he brought your name up, and we had such there was this connection that I
Mhm.
felt like I needed to talk to someone that experienced life during that time where my daughters were a product of. So that's really why.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that actually was a great privilege for me to share my story and can bring some insights to the understanding of that era that you experienced and that your daughters actually experienced. So
Yeah.
tell a little bit more about your initial idea of adopting a kid from China, not just one, two. Would you like
Mhm.
to share your first adoption journey and
Sure.
experience?
Sure, sure. I actually am really blessed that during that time I wrote everything down through both of my journeys. So it's very memorable because I had to put it on paper. So the initial adoption for my first daughter came about when my husband at the time and I couldn't, we went through many years of fertility issues and went through in vitro fertilization, all of those things, and we were unsuccessful. And his family was familiar with just adoption in general. I had not been familiar with adoption. so he and I went to an adoption workshop, and it was about international adoption, and it was put on by an adoption agency, and they shared, a little bit about the pros and cons of each country's international adoption and what you kind of had to do, and what were the steps to take, and basically an introduction to international adoption. And so we walked away from that little Saturday afternoon meeting saying, you know, we are not world travelers, but we also don't we want to make it easy on ourselves because this is a very stressful thing, but we want to move forward no matter what. And at the time, it felt like China was a natural fit for us because they had already gone through many, many adoptions. And it felt like it was a very well organized, low risk, and we would kind of be taken by the hand and shown the process, um, a very unfamiliar process to us. And so it felt like China was definitely at the time a much easier route to take, and there were lots of really great experiences from other families that had gone through it, and so we felt like that's where we wanted to go. And so we made a decision and went with this adoption agency that put on this class, I should say, and started the process. It was a very lengthy process. I will say that that was 21 years ago for me, for our first, because my daughter's 21 years old, and she was 9 months old when we brought her home. So 21 years ago, we filled out paperwork, we did fingerprints, we did home studies with a social worker who came to our home and made sure that we were good people, and
Yeah.
did there was a lot of red tape, go to the police station and have a letter written saying that we were good people, and go to our jobs and say, it was just a lot of references and fingerprints and money, and so, but we were very comfortable with the people that we went through. We were very confident and comfortable. And that first experience took approximately 9 months from when we started it to when we traveled to China the first time. And almost like, a pregnancy. So I felt like, okay, this is like being pregnant, only not being pregnant. And we traveled to China 9 months later. And again, like I said, we were not world travelers. It was very scary. I took my mom and my stepdad with us so that they could experience this as well. They were excited about being grandparents, and we flew across the world. And I remember getting off the plane, and I remember kissing the ground and making it there because that was the furthest I had ever traveled. And I was so anxious about being a mom that I had a lot of anxiety about actually making it there. I thought, okay, I've done all this work, and here's the time it's going to happen. But being on a flight, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make it. And I kissed the ground when I got there. And we had an amazing experience. Once we got there, we had lunch with the locals and with a facilitator that we used. And then we hopped on another plane and flew to her province. And it was the very next day that we, in the hotel, like ballroom, that we met our child for the first time. And I remember it very vividly 21 years later. I remember the babies they were all in another room, and there were probably about 10 families. And the babies were crying in the other room because they had traveled early in the morning. And I think it was probably a 2 or 3 hour drive from that particular orphanage to where we were staying. Um, and they were restless and crying, and then it was like a ceremony for this adoption, the first adoption. It was like a ceremony, and they would call one family up, and they would announce the baby's name, and then the people from the orphanage would, whoever the foster mother or whatever would be holding the baby, would come out and would hand the baby to you, and you would be standing up in front of everyone, and everybody clapped, and then we sat down and we went through all 10 families, and then it was like, there you were a mom. It was like, there you just you just experienced your first child delivery. It was looking back at it, it seems a little strange, but it was something so memorable. And that was my first experience being a mom. And it was
Wow.
like, here you are. Okay, now,
Amazing.
now be a mom. And
Yeah.
she was 9 months old, and some of the babies were crying, some of the babies, they were all kind of different ages.
Yeah.
And she just stared at us, very stoic, and just was I trying to figure it out, trying to take it all in. She didn't cry at all. In fact, the entire 2 weeks we were there with her, she did not cry at all. She just
Wow.
kind of took everything in. So it
Wow.
was it was easy for us because she was easy. There were other families that didn't have as easy of an experience. I remember families were walking the halls of the hotel, trying to get the babies to stop crying. And
Mhm.
we just really had a wonderful experience. And so we were in her province for the first week, because the first week it was to get the Chinese paperwork completed, so that she could travel within China. And I didn't, and I, this is what was told to me at the time, was that you had to have a passport, a Chinese passport, in order to travel within China from province to province. And so what was explained to us was we spent that first week, you know, going through that paperwork to get her a Chinese passport so that she could fly from her province to Guangzhou, where the US consulate was.
Mhm.
And then, so we were able to spend a week in her province, and kind of, we just explored and waited for our paperwork to be done, and learned to be parents in a hotel room.
Yeah.
And then we traveled to Guangzhou and spent another week getting the US paperwork so that we
Mhm.
could travel from China home, and being a citizen and all of that work. And at the very end of our trip, we raised our right hand and said an oath in the US consulate, and headed to the airport and flew home. And so it was a very ceremonious trip that first time. It was not stressful. It was very enjoyable, I will say. My second trip, not as much. It was a little much different than the first trip. So I'm really glad that I had such um a great experience the first time. The second time was still a good experience. It just was different. I'm glad
Yeah.
I had a chance to experience something that was so warm and inviting, and terrifying, all in one.
Yeah. Before you are sharing your second experience, I would like
Mhm.
to explain what is one child policy, and you can tell for the audience. Obviously, I'm not that young, not like a 21-year-old that
Right, right,
my
right, right.
daughter. Why we are also from the same era is the one-child policy is a policy that only limit the family to have one child in China. It was enforced in the late 70s when I was born. And
Hmm.
then later on, actually, it lasted to very recently.
Very recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very recently. So that's why Anna's daughters also were born in that era, and girls were tended to be less valuable in China back then because imagine they in the society they value men more, boys more because they carry the name, and
Hmm.
with that the traditional mind, and so girls were often put to adoption. That's how Anna's two daughters ended up in the orphanage. And back then, I was born in a village, and they even didn't have an orphanage. So
Hmm.
they tried to. My parents, my father tried to send me away. Nobody actually accepted me. So that's something a little bit different, but it's a great experience that you had because the love of crossing the borders and also your kindness of crossing the borders brought your daughter to be united with you. And now she had a brand new opportunity to grow as a confident girl and
Hmm.
valued and cherished.
Yeah.
So now, yeah, tell me again. I know that fulfill your motherly dream and being a mom, and it's the first drive to adopt your first daughter. So tell me about your adopting the experience about adopting your second daughter.
Sure, sure. It was like I said earlier, and I'm glad that you shared the one child policy because that was a very big and important piece of this puzzle. And it was
Mhm.
for us very important to understand that what had occurred. And like you said, there is a big age gap, but that era lasted from the 70s until recently. So it was a very, very large um, time frame that
Yes.
you know that people had to experience this, and we were probably right in the middle of that, right in the middle.
Yeah.
So again, and there were rules and regulations when it came to adopting more than one child. Back then, the rule was that you couldn't adopt a second child until you had been home for 1 year. And so we had to make that decision on whether or not we wanted to do it again. But I remember we looked down at our daughter and we said, she needs a sibling. She needs a sister. And so we decided to do it again. And we put in our paperwork on exactly on the year mark, thankfully. And when we put it in, they said, okay, well, this time it may be a little bit longer than the first time. We go, okay, that's fine. They said, well, we think it'll be around 11 months this time. Okay, no problem. A couple extra months. We've got our hands full. We're busy. We're grateful. Fine. 11 months turned into 22 months. So almost 2 years later, um, we were able to travel a second time. And so the girls, and this time our second daughter was about 8 months old. She was a little bit younger. And we were grateful. I think because we were young, I think during that time it was typical that the young, I don't know, there was no real definitive answer as to how the children were matched with the parents. It just was this mystery. But what seemed to happen were the younger children were matched with the younger parents. And at the time my first adoption, I was 30 years old on the mark. And that was the minimum age you could be, 30 years old. And so again, our second child, she was young, she was 8 months old. And this time was a little bit different. We were able to receive pictures of her in the orphanage. I think we had paid someone it was like a service that she had, and she went to the orphanage and she took pictures and sent them home. So we had a little bit of extra information this time. Um, and so then we traveled the second time, but we left our first daughter at home with my parents and some friends and family to watch her for the 2 weeks we would be gone, because we knew it would be very difficult to bring a child with us. Lots of people did that, but we chose not to. We flew there again. This time it was just the two of us. We said, we did it before, we can do it again. And I will tell you, it was a much different experience. So landing, same thing, had lunch. Okay, here we are. This should be the same. And then we flew out to her province, which is a different province. And I remember it was raining and it was midsummer. It was pretty miserable weather. And we kept getting moved around hotel rooms, and it was very kind of chaotic. And they said, okay, the babies are here, they're ready. And instead of it being in a hotel room, ballroom, where it was very ceremonial, we hopped in a bus and we drove a couple blocks over and got in this business building, very tiny elevator. I think it was a freight elevator. It wasn't a passenger elevator, it was a freight elevator. We went up to this government office and we walked in this room, and there were all these babies there. And they were crying, and we were like, oh my gosh, which one is ours, right? And you're
Yeah.
looking around because you had seen pictures, and you spot your child from across the room. And there were probably about the same 10 families.
Mhm.
And you spot your child across the room and go, oh my gosh, I think that's her. And then it was just this very chaotic, okay, here's yours, and here's yours, and here's yours, and here's yours. And she was crying, and she was miserable. And we just were like, we did not know what just hit us. This was such a different experience than the first time. Same tears. We both, I shed many tears because we had made it. Here we are as parents again.
Yeah.
But she was pretty miserable. And and yes, we had been parents, but this was a new thing because, here we are in a foreign country again, and we don't know how, I think she had an ear infection, and so we ended up having to have a doctor come to the hotel room. And I mean, it was midsummer, and it just, it was like, all we wanted to do was get home this time. All we wanted to do was get home, but we were able to do some, we were still there. Same exact experience. We were in her province for a week. We actually traveled to her orphanage, so we saw it in person,
Mm.
which was very eye-opening for us. Very eye-opening. My ex-husband said he wished he never went to see it
Okay.
because it was really hard to see.
Yeah.
Just the living quarters, it was that was their reality. I'm very blessed that I saw it so that I understood what their living situation was. But we were able to see that during that travel, and then we spent another week back in Guangzhou, and then we flew home, and we were very happy to be home, and
I'm
united the two of them once we got
mm,
home, and those two have been inseparable ever since. And so they're both now 21 and 18 years old.
Wow.
and doing their thing and college, graduated from college and one's in college and they they understand their story. They have a special connection with their story. We talk about it. We've talked about it. It's very, very special in our lives.
Mhm.
Looking back at it, it wasn't like I grew up and said, "Oh, I want to adopt when I grow up. I want to adopt when I grow up. I want to fly to China and adopt when I grow up." It just happened to be
Yeah,
that that's how it happened. And I'm so grateful and so blessed. And it's really hard to believe that it's been that many years since this happened because I can picture it vividly
yeah,
like it was yesterday.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's it.
Wow.
That's my story.
Wow, your experience definitely similar to a lot of parenting experience. Have the first one so easy, and I got to have
Right.
another one.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, that's
Very
a little bit
similar.
more challenging, but at the same time, you just have a different experience. And by the way, did any of your just one any of your daughters asked you about the orphanage situation since you have seen that?
I have pictures. They've seen pictures, but in their 18 and 21 years, they have not. They don't really show a whole lot of interest in it.
Hmm.
I and I don't know why. It could be for very, lots of reasons, but I have all of that information. So when and if they ever want to know more, it's there.
Hmm.
Um, but they do, I think they deal with the story. I think they deal with the fact that that they had a story before us
Hmm.
and but all they know is us. And so I think that they struggle a little bit with that, and that's probably
Yeah.
why they don't ask about it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more about this experience. Reason them, they were brought up their identity confusion when they grew up, or there were occasional instances or situations that you felt challenged that you didn't know how to respond.
So from the beginning, it's a very good question because it's something that I knew that we may face in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was very diligent about understanding where they came from and their environment and all of those things. And like I said, that seeing the orphanage in person was very helpful for me to understand that. And from day one, we always made it a point to make it the reality. This is where you came from. This is your experience. They know their story very much. They, because we've always made it a point we never hid the story. It wasn't like we just won't talk about it. We talked about it often, especially when they were little. When
Mm-hmm.
Mother's Day came out, we would always say a special prayer to, the woman in China who gave birth to, who cared enough to ensure that, they were loved and taken care of. And so we always made it a point every Mother's Day to say something. So it's been a part of their story. So they don't, I think that they just have always just accepted it, but not really I suppose it's like any other kid. They don't really care about talking about their childhood. It's like, it's just my childhood. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's the approach that I think. But I think as they get older, they'll probably start exploring it a little bit more. I would imagine, because as we all grow, as adults, we wonder what our childhood was like. And so I think
Mhm.
that that's where that will come up. I don't think that they've had any sort of confusion, or it's always been this warm and inviting
Yeah.
experience that we've
Yeah.
really, really tried to make it so that when and if the time came, they asked questions that we would have answers. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Open communication and inviting environment and nurturing environment
mhm,
definitely help kids
mhm,
to adjust or adapt to new environment. And as you said, in their world, in their lives, you are there and you are the life,
mhm.
you are the experience
Right,
that
right.
showed them. I'm so glad that they grew up without any of the hidden
Mhm,
trauma or something. And you are, I just want to say the reason why you are here is because I feel like you are just a light to them. And also this tenderness and the loving nature from a mom like you really made a big difference. And I always had the admiration for the adoptive
mhm,
parents uh,
mhm,
who need to take so much to they take the courage to make this first step
mm.
to adopt a child. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny because like I said, I know it wasn't something that I set out to do a long time ago, but it was something that became so natural that didn't seem like I was doing anything different than anyone else. But you're not the only person that has said that, and I appreciate that. But it was just like, I don't know, this is what I'm doing,
Mhm.
and it didn't take anything extra for me to want to do. It was just like I wanted to be a parent and I wanted to love a child, and this was the only way that I would be able to. And
Mhm.
so that was just the route I took, but I wasn't, I wasn't setting out to save a child, but I'm so grateful that knowing that that's
Mhm.
essentially, especially after talking to you,
Yeah.
and what you had experienced in your life, I'm so grateful that there is that added layer of
Yes.
their story, their unknown story, it never had that part never happened. And
Yeah.
so, and I don't know if they'll ever understand that, but I understand the value of that. So I'm grateful that I did it.
Yeah.
It makes it extra special for me too.
Yeah. That's great. That's the extra layer of yeah, this understanding and uh yeah,
Hmm.
deeply value their presence
Hmm.
in your life. So talking about that, from our last conversation, I remember you brought up a message is that because we only have one life, why
Hmm.
just need to maximize our value. I think that's one aspect you have definitely done beautifully, raising two beautiful children. And also
Yes.
on the side, you also started a podcast
Hmm.
that is continuing your passion of supporting others, of contributing to the society and community as a guiding light or supporting force. Would you like
Hmm.
to share about your value in that part?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up the fact that, you only have one life to live. I'm a
Mhm.
very big fan of that. And so I think that because of that, I have chosen to not be fearful about what people think of me, and I love to support other people and lift other people up. And so many years ago I had decided to do a podcast uh with the same mission. It was lifting other people up, celebrating them, living big, finding the magic in life. In fact, that podcast still exists out there. I think there were only 10 episodes, but it is called Live Big, Find Your Magic.
Mhm.
And in this next, form of it, so I'm a nurse by trade, and I'm in the legal nurse consulting um, business community. And I realized that there are so many of us out there that have different stories that I feel like people need to hear. And it's mostly uh our colleagues,
Mhm.
we can relate to our colleagues' story in one way or another, but we all have such different stories and such different journeys, even though we all ended up in the same place, essentially. And so that's why every time I have an interview with another nurse or another attorney or a physician, we're all on the same page. We all have a story. We all have something in our life that happened that I like to pull out the light in it. Like you said, be a light. I like to pull out the light in it. I like to find those light bulb moments or those joyous moments. Or I just got off an interview this morning, and the nurse that I spoke to has, she's hiked all over the world. She's spent a month in India. She's done all of these things. I think it's so fascinating because it's something I haven't done, and I'm sure other people haven't done. But the fact that one of us, a nurse like us, has done that, I think deserves to be recognized and seen. And so I get a lot of joy in just being the person that asks the questions. Tell me your story. I want to hear it. And then tell me more about it. And I'm simply just the person that asks the questions, and they I guess trust me enough to share their story, and everybody wins. Everybody's lifted up, and I get to celebrate other people, which I think for me is more valuable than anything. Is when I can celebrate other people, it brings me up, it lifts me up. So that's really why I did it. It's just every interview is an opportunity to get to know somebody else's story. It's fascinating to me. So that's it. I love it.
Yeah. That's why we're so connected because we
Mm-hmm.
have the similar value and how we see
Mm-hmm.
things in life. I love the message like everyone got one life and everyone has their unique stories to share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what inspires me the most is everyone's willingness to uplift others,
Mm-hmm.
and which you have been already doing that. And also yesterday I just attended a seminar hosted at our company's Ignite Your Potential. And there
Mm-hmm.
was one message is to find your value. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm clearly now, I just want to be a light to the people around
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Just simple like that. And
Yeah.
sharing, inspiring at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, also extraordinary, also ordinary
Mm-hmm.
individuals'
Right.
experiences
Right.
to
Right.
inspire others
Mm-hmm.
to dream bigger,
Mm-hmm.
to look further, to do more with this single life that we have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I love that. I love that. And it's so rewarding.
Yes.
It's
Totally.
rewarding to you, and it's rewarding to the person you're lifting up. So nobody loses.
Yes.
Everybody wins in that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
totally. We
that.
definitely need this environment is to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uplift each other, as not to compete and fight and or
Right.
badly
Exactly.
competing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so great to have you on my podcast. Do you have messages to particular to girls who may have experienced some um, abandonment or something?
Mm-hmm.
How to say?
Mm-hmm.
Just a trauma that they may not even understand, but that existed. Uh, do you have any thing to do?
That's an interesting question. I wonder if I were to ask my daughters what their mom would say. I don't know. Um, I would say, and I think that I still try to instill this in my kids, that I think with everything, there can be disappointments in life, right? We can fail at things. We can be abandoned. We can not have things go our way. And what's always done, I would say my mantra is, if it's not this, it's something better. And
Mm,
that rings true for everything, and I think I could easily, and I didn't say this back then, but I could even take that into my own life in saying, I may have dreamt to be a mother naturally, and have my own children from myself. And I had to get through that somehow. And I didn't know how to put that into words then, but I would say the same thing holds true. If it wasn't this, then it's something better. So if
mhm.
if I didn't have kids on my own, or for those, I have friends who, maybe their biological clock is ticking and they feel like their world is shrinking because of that.
Yeah.
There's still light at the end of the tunnel. There's still, if it's not this, if it wasn't meant to be, if I was not meant to have my own children biologically, then it's got to be something better. And look, now it is like 1,000 times better because my children are amazing. But if I were to sit back and not feel like there was something out there better, more amazing, then I could probably still be sitting back wondering what if, And so I try to instill that in my kids. And I have always tried to instill that in my kids when they get disappointed, when something happens, when maybe they didn't get into the college they wanted to get into. It's like, if it wasn't this, it's something better. It will be something better. And it always rings true. So
Yeah.
I think that in a nutshell, I think would be my biggest piece of advice for anyone, really.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. If it's not this, then got to be something better
Yeah.
waiting, and just
Yeah.
keep doing what you want
Yep.
to do. Yeah,
Yep.
don't um, let fear or any other restraints to restrict
Exactly.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much for such uplifting message. Amen. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you for being a strong knight here to share your inspiring stories and your family story that is going to inspire others to hope more, to dream bigger, to do more, and to be even kinder and love more. So
I
thank
hope
you
so.
so much to be on my show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. For our audience, thank you so much for listening. If you're here, means you also want to be a light and you are going to ignite your potential and to shine brighter and stronger. And thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please share, like, and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much.